An orphan with old man's eyes. The Caldwell family story. Timothy Caldwell was an orphan with old man's eyes. His parents died of a rare disease when he was only 8 years old, leaving him alone in the world. His only remaining relatives were his parents' brother, Thomas, and his wife, Sarah. They lived in a remote village, far away from the city where Timothy had spent his whole life with his parents. His uncle and aunt weren't prepared to raise a child, but they were the only family he had left. So Timothy packed a small suitcase with his few belongings and set off to live with the Caldwells. When Timothy arrived at his uncle's house, he noticed something peculiar. The windows were nailed shut from the inside. The yard was filled with rusty tools and old tires, and there wasn't a single toy to be seen anywhere. Inside the house, everything seemed shrouded in darkness, even though it was the middle of the day. The walls were covered in thick, dark curtains, and the only light came from a small fire crackling in the hearth. Thomas and Sarah Caldwell were tough, war-weary people. Their faces were lined and creased, their eyes hollow and distant. It was clear that they had seen and experienced things that no one should ever have to endure. When they learned that their brother and sister-in-law were dead, they had despaired at the thought of taking care of their nephew. But they knew it was their duty to take him in. They had no choice. And so they did their best to hide their despair as they welcomed Timothy into their home. Timothy looked strange. He was too pale and quiet. His eyes seemed to have no childhood in them, but despite his eerie demeanor, Timothy was polite and well-mannered. He helped his aunt with the dishes and his uncle with the repairs around the house. He never complained or asked for anything. He just worked quietly and politely, which made him even more alarming. Days turned into weeks, and still, Timothy never uttered a sound. He didn't play like other children. He didn't laugh or cry. He just worked. His silence was unsettling. His lack of childhood was disturbing. His polite and docile nature was unnatural. One evening, as Timothy sat by the fire, his aunt couldn't hold back her worrying any longer. "Why are you so quiet, Timothy? Why don't you talk or ask for anything?" she asked him. Timothy looked up from the flames, and his eyes, which seemed so old and wise, held a flicker of sadness. "I'm sorry, Aunt Sarah. I know I haven't been talking much, but it's just that I'm not good with people. I get uncomfortable, and I don't know what to say," his aunt gasped. She had never heard him raise his voice, let alone admit to having feelings. "You're not good with people," she repeated, more to herself than to Timothy. She looked at her husband, Thomas, who was silent, his gaze fixed on the fire. Then she turned back to Timothy and said, "We may not be good with words, Timothy, but we understand the language of actions. Show us what you can do around here, and we'll see if we can make a place for you here." And so Timothy continued to work around the house, tending the garden, fixing the fences, and helping with the chores. His uncle and aunt watched him, trying to gauge his every move, searching for any sign of trouble. But Timothy never gave them reason to worry. He was strong and capable, yet gentle and kind. After a while, the Caldwells began to accept Timothy as part of their family. They were still wary, still cautious, but they were learning to trust him. They might not have been able to give him the childhood he deserved, but they could at least offer him a home. And maybe, just maybe, he could teach them how to love again. The end.